Thank you very much, Ms. Michelle. So I guess it's really important for us to keep up to date with the latest data and all that in order for us to keep on moving. And you have heard from all the three speakers. Let's give them another round of applause, please, ladies and gentlemen. And now it's time for the questions and answer session. To help us moderate this session, I am pleased to invite MHF First Tunas Warisan recipient, Ms. Shaza Ishak, the Managing Director of Theatre Eka Matra, a local theatre company established in 1988. Graduated with a Master of Arts in 2019 from the Royal Central School of Speech and Drama, United Kingdom. So for those with burning questions, now is the perfect time to ask. We have microphone now roving over, yes, right over there. And when posing a question, please be respectful and identify yourself. In addition to this, we have also made available Slido. Yes, so we go to that page. Okay, for those who prefer this mode, you may scan the following QR code to submit your question. Please go to slido.com and input code 409652. I repeat, 409652. Without further ado, over to you, Ms. Shaza.
Thank you so much for the incredibly illuminating presentations, everyone. I'm going to take Sembang very seriously, and let's keep it super chill. So please ask as many questions as you would like. And I imagine there would be many. I have a lot, but I'm going to pace myself first. So while you hopefully putting your questions at Slido, I actually wanted to ask if I could ask you, Michelle, I looked at the the population census and ethnic classifications, and I don't know if you noticed, but at the top it says Europeans, and then in the other one it says was it Chinese first, and then Europeans, Eurasians, so on and so forth. And I was just wondering why, because obviously it doesn't make sense alphabetically. Is there a reason why it was that way?
It is definitely not alphabetical, and if you notice, it's not by majority either, because by majority, Malays were actually the highest majority population in both census, but Malays were not written right on top. So there were scholars that think that this census were produced for the British. So they put this guy nodding his head at me. No, so scholars criticized that these were of British imperialism, and they put Europeans and their own people right on top. It could be that, so scholars criticize that it is for the reporting, that they want to report themselves on top of the list, followed by those who are closest to them in terms of social status. So the second and third in line were actually the Peranakans and the Straits-born Chinese. And there were scholars that criticized that people got to know the British when they were doing the population census in order to be counted and to be represented higher up on the table. So that was a very interesting finding. Some other scholars also criticized that these tables were formed not for majority status, but to just show who is of a higher social status in the Strait settlement.
That's really disturbing.
Yes, it is.
And interesting, yes. I have also a question for Manaka and Jamal, because when I was listening to what you guys were talking about, you mentioned navigating stakeholders. And I wanted to know how you navigate the different interests of different stakeholders. For example, with the Malay Heritage Center, you mentioned the descendants of the Istana, and I can imagine what they would want presented would be very different, wildly different from what you wanted, what the government wanted, who's putting money where. And for Minaka, you mentioned, the signage issue as well. Even something we might think is quite simple, but it's really not. How have you navigated in the last years that you've been working in these places?
Sure. Various stakeholders, of course, have different wants and needs, which is why when we first engaged before we even started work, we had a series of focus group discussions where we met everyone. We listened, we heard what they wanted, and we measured it according to what resources and our own bandwidth that were available. And of course, whether it was in alignment with our broader picture, our broader plan. So if it fit in, then we, of course, could create opportunities. And if it did not, or it was just a bit off, or if it is very strange, then we would do our best to communicate to them what our intent is so they could understand. So let's say I receive proposal and I think it wouldn't work. I don't just outright reject it. I say, oh yeah, interesting. And sometimes you play delay tactics until they forget. But when it comes to the the descendants of the former royal family, it's very, very, very sensitive because historically, what happened between them and the state and how the property was taken over by the government, it's a very, very delicate situation, and it's still a very delicate situation. And the family is big. It's quite a big family, So we needed to figure out who's who has claims to what, who is a reasonable resource person, who's a bit a bit wild in terms of their ideas and concepts that they want to improve. So we handle them on a case-to-case basis. I think by and large, the family has been quite accommodating. They've been quite understanding to what we want to do. And they, it took a while for us to communicate that vision, So in the first few years, it was always suspicion. What you want to do? Why you take my house, But when they saw what we wanted to do after a few years, we gained their trust. Actually, if you go to the Malay Heritage Center in 2011-2012, even though we were Istana Kampung Glam, there are very limited royal objects in there. And the reason we don't have royal objects in there is because the royal family were not very forthcoming in sharing some of these objects. And it's because of the history between them and the state. So we because we come from NHB, right? We are public servants. So they do view us as mechanisms of the state. But we are also people who serve the community. So we needed to gain their trust on that. And I think after a few years, Tengku Indra very graciously loaned an item to us for a special exhibition. And that was only the beginning. And we know okay, there needs to be a lot more engagement to talk to them. And slowly, he started attending our events. He started loaning items. He was very open to permanent loans. But not every member of the family has objects. Not every member of the family has that claim. We've had some strange requests. I'll be very candid about this. It's not someone I know, but Nora curator then shared with me. So a member of the family came and said, I want to collect something that I buried on the grounds. I was like, apa benda sih? So, we were in construction, so we're like, okay, yeah, go ahead, dig. So we just let them dig and collect whatever it was. And yeah, it was pretty much...
Did you see it?
Of course not.
Oh,
I didn't even want to know what it was. But yeah, so those kind of a bit, funny requests. So, yeah.
Thank you. Menaka?
Okay, so I'll talk about the Indian Heritage Center because the very formation of the Indian Heritage Center was actually quite interesting in the sense that when we talk about stakeholders and navigating stakeholders' expectations, right? The very first question that came was where the museum would be located, because it's the first purpose-built museum in Singapore, all right? Which meant that it could be anywhere, okay? And of course, we can imagine the sensitivities around that, right? Where do we identify as the best place for the Indian museum to be placed? Where do Indians congregate? And the first choice, of course, was Little India, right? Which is, as you would know, lots of shops, people go there to eat, people go there to shop, and that's it. It's completely devoid of anything artistic or cultural, right? At least in the present times. In the past, it was quite different. And then it became a question of where in Little India it should be placed, okay? Little India spans actually all the way from Seligi to Potong Pasir, technically, right? But we know of Little India from Little India Arcade to Mustafa Center, okay? Which meant that Serangoon Road was that prime road, and the museum had to be somewhere accessible from Serangoon Road. Now, we could have gone to Racecourse Road, which is just the next street over. If you all have been there, you'll see a huge field called Farrer Park, right? Where we could have had car parks, we could have had the theater, we could have had like a huge facility, but no. For the expectation of the Indian community and our stakeholders, it had to be in the heart of Little India. So where's the heart of Little India? Camberlane, all right? So they got us a plot that actually used to be a cow shed at one point. Then it became a banana stall. Then it became a shop that was owned by Mustafa at one point. Then it became an empty ground for a while where the cows would come during Pongal. Okay, it's a very, very small triangular plot. It's a very awkward shaped plot. It's not even rectangular, it's triangular. Okay, and they decided at the very end of Campbell Lane, in the heart of Little India, this is where we're going to build the story of the Indian community. Okay, so 4 stories, all right, in a very, very tight space. The architects did an incredible job. If you walk into the Indian Heritage Center, you won't realize how small it is. They were geniuses, okay? They made a miracle out of the space that was given to them. The second thing is that the museum was supposed to be a reflection of the Indian community, of the Indian history, our stories, our migration patterns, etc., right? And within the Indian community itself, we have hundreds of different ethnic community groups. So how do you keep them all happy? We had several feedback sessions across the board with teachers, with educators, with government agencies, government bodies, with community leaders. And for a lot of them, they really wanted their community to be represented. And a lot of them were shooting for, I want a section here on the Malayalis, I want a section here on the Tamils, I want a section here on the Gujaratis, on the Sikhs, etc. Now we realized that in a 4-story building that was actually only open to the public, 3 levels, okay, that it would be impossible to do that. So to manage the expectations, the whole curation and creation of the exhibitions themselves had to be rethought. It had to be reconceptualized. And the way it's done is, you have the first sort of room that you go into. The first exhibition is on the migration patterns, the roots, as you would say. Where you came from, how you came, and what are the artifacts that are related to that, right? Evidence of that particular migration pattern. Then you move into the second exhibition, which is really all about your rituals, the kind of rituals that people practice. So everything from marriage, funeral rites, birth, celebrations, festivals, as an example. The third exhibition is all about the industries, your workforce, the jobs or the roles that several people within the community played, in particular to the Indian community. And then the last one was about the sort of renowned pioneers who made Singapore what it is, who really contributed to the community, right? By doing that, we were able to touch upon as many communities as we could, because all of them share a similar sort of, not similar, but all of them share a commonality across the board. And we were able to represent them in that way, and that kept them quiet. They were like, okay, yeah, I'm my ceremonial knot is there, or stuff like that, right? Of course, there will be people who will always challenge that, and that's where programming comes in, because there's only so much that you can do with space and fixed objects. We decided to ensure that special exhibitions would be held every year, specifically dedicated to various communities. We also decided that programming would be done that way to represent the different, cultural celebrations, the different linguistics, the different sort of, practices, rituals, etc. So even today, Pongal, for example, we have an open house, we have a Deepavali open house. We try as much as possible to keep our stakeholders engaged and interested by doing these sort of things. Yeah.
Thank you so much. In the same vein, there is another question that's on the Slido. For Ms. Manaka and Mr. Jamal, were there situations where you wanted to do something, but the government said no? If yes, can you share some stories? I love this.
No lah, I don't have. Actually, no. I think we because we're public service officers, right? There are certain protocols. We present our proposals to our bosses, that we present to our board of directors, and so on and so forth. So there's different levels to make sure that we don't go beyond a certain boundary of tolerable content. But we have encountered certain sensitivities for certain art forms and certain decisions we made in terms of how we represented some things. I'll give you two examples. One is actually a mural, which we painted. I think this was part of Singapore Heritage Fest. So it was a temporary mural. It was going to be there for 2 months. We're going to paint over it anyway. So I was working with Zul Zero, who's a graffiti artist. So his work doesn't engage with Malay content as much. So I really pushed him to do it. So I shared certain narratives with him, and he was very attracted to one particular story. 2 stories actually. One was a Syair about Tengku Prabu. Tengku Prabu was Sultan Hussein's 3rd wife, and it was about some scandal in the palace. So he wanted to paint that. I said, I don't think that's a good idea. Yeah, we perhaps should not paint the scandal. He's okay, let's not do that. Let's do something else. So there's another story which is about Wat Chanto. Wat Chanto is an old man who was somewhat betrothed to a younger girl. I think she was a teenager still, and this was in the 1800s. And when he went to, he's a Bugis man, and from time to time he would travel back to the country and come back. And this would take a year, like you have to wait for the monsoon. So when he came back, she married someone else already. Then he mengamuk lah, and he started stabbing a bunch of people along the way. So this is a very dark history, right? So it's a tragedy that actually happened. It was immortalized in a novel and later in a play. So Zul was like, wow, this is very exciting. So he painted it in the style of 1970s comics. So I think in terms of heritage, I tick 4 boxes lah. It actually happened. It became a book. It became a play. It was done in a certain style, right? But because we painted it on a wall that had, the family members who used to live there thought that it's perhaps not the best idea to put a tragedy on their wall. So yeah, we had to deal with that situation lah. This was, she wrote a letter for it's all very public. Another one. But then again, because it was a temporary mural, we painted over it and everybody was happy. But we met up with them and we spoke to them why we did it. They understood. They said, next time put something happier lah. My argument was, if you study Malay folktales, everything is a tragedy. Everybody dies, right? Yeah. So many tragic princesses all die tragic deaths. Kena lenyek batu lah, kena lenyek boat lah, If not, we won't have Pontianaks. Then the second thing is, and I think this is a bit, it's partly, it's not really something the state wasn't supportive of, but it was a very sensitive thing. Kuda Kepang. Kuda Kepang is a sensitive art form, right? And we presented Kuda Kepang twice before. And I am not someone who would censor cultural practitioners when they do their thing. I told them to be careful, take responsibility, and I know Kuda Kepang from time to time, it gets a bit wild. So we managed it as best we could in terms of security, so people don't get disturbed. We told people don't wear it, don't kind of chase, things like that. But if that did happen, right, we had security around. So it was quite well managed. The third time we staged it, I think it got a bit too wild. They climbed the speakers lah. There were chicken present lah. So the next time we wanted to do it, there were whispers that saying we should not. So when we met the Kuda Kepang community, said, sorry guys, we can't do the trance this year. They were very unhappy. And if you know Kuda Kepang practitioners, a lot of them tend to be kind of thuggish. This is the more marginalized segment of our community who tend to be attracted to Kuda Kepang. And I think it says something that they're very unhappy. This is their only platform that they have. and they wanted to menurun. And if they cannot menurun, they will cause a riot. So I had a meeting with all the 14 heads, it's all the 14 heads of the groups. I said, guys, don't do this, I'm very supportive of what you do, we should open dialogue. Maybe we chill this year, we try again next year. And yeah, they agreed to it. So we did present the Kuda Kepang with a reenactment of the trance. Yeah, and we spoke over it. So that's one way where we sort of navigated the sensitivities and concerns of the community and our stakeholders. Yeah. There's a lot more, but
Later.
I think the biggest challenge is always when the topic of religion comes in. Because with the Indian community and with most cultures, a lot of the art forms are, they began with, expression of devotion to a particular god or goddess. So if we do a program, the biggest thing that they always tell us to be very careful about is to not mention anything religious, is to keep it religious free. So I think that has always been a challenge, and even at CIFAS, it's always the same problem. I mean, how do you subtract religion from Bharatanatyam or Carnatic vocals when all you're singing is about God, right? So, but we found ways to spin it around, we found ways to market it differently and stuff. But in the Indian Heritage Center, the biggest concern that I would say a lot of government officials had was about the congregation of too many people in a small space. Now, you guys would have obviously known about the riots that happened in Little India, right? Which caused a lot of policy changes in Little India. And with Indian Heritage Center located on Camberlane, which is now pedestrianized, a lot of our programs actually take place on Camberlane itself, because that's where we can actually fit people, right? And if you're gonna do a festival, if you're gonna do a program, you want hundreds of people to be there. You wanna reach out to as many people as possible. But that presents a challenge in terms of security, safety. I can't stop drunkards from being there. I can't stop, gangsters from being there. I mean, it's Little India. It's a congregation for the community. It's a waterhole for everybody, right? So I think that was always a very, very sensitive point. And there's this one particular festival that we wanted to have, which was, so the thing about Indian arts, I would say, is that there's a folk aspect to it, there is the classical aspect to it, and in one particular instance, I remember suggesting wanting to do an Urumi Melam competition, okay? For those who don't know what Urumi Melam is basically a group of people coming together, playing the Urumi along with other percussion items, singing devotional songs. Now, this is a common practice at various festivals, mostly religious festivals, but the thing about the Indian community is that religious festivals are also cultural for us. It's where people come together. It's not just for the practice of your religion, but it's really for socializing. And that is a very, very typical traditional way of doing it. You see it in temples, you see it outside of temples, even in people's houses when they have prayers and stuff. They'll get an Urumi Melam group to come. And it's super hyped up music, which I thought, let's do something really cool. And if we want to be inclusive and get the youths involved in there and local Singaporean Indians to come to the space, that would be a great way to do it. But because of the connotation that it has to gangsterism or rowdy behavior or thuggish behavior, we were told not to do so. So I kind of channeled it around and just got Damaru instead, which is a multi-percussion group of youths. And I still got the drumming in. We still managed to get the youth in, but just in a very different way. So it's all about managing, presenting the art form, but doing it in a different way, right? That would be, allowed, I would say, yeah.
Thank you so much.
I'd just like to add one more thing. Sometimes the sensitivities would come from art forms that are performed locally. I staged Mak Yong Main Putri, a healing ritual from Kelantan, which also has a trance element to it. But because it came from somewhere else, it didn't face that as much censorship. So it's just something to think about. I think we're okay if someone else does it, not so good if we do it ourselves. Yeah.
Is there any questions from the audience? Sam? Oh, just one question. Just one moment, please.
I'd like to pose a question to Mr. Jamal. As a senior manager of the Malay Heritage Foundation, which unfortunately will be stepping down next week. Center, all right. Malay Heritage Center. I believe you are the most appropriate person to answer this question. I believe the MHC's vision is to develop a leading heritage center that is the focal point for the community, right? Yeah, since the Malay community comprises of people with vastly different ancestries, such as the Javanese, the Banjaris, the Sundanese, I'd like to know what is being done to raise awareness and to celebrate the history of the ancestors within the Malay Heritage Center. Yeah.
So I think I shared earlier this platform called the Senusantara series. So the Senusantara series is where we focus on a sub-ethnic community group and have them sort of take over the crafting of the exhibition and programming for the year. Right? So this we used to do a special exhibition, 2 exhibitions a year. But when we started the Senusantara series, we started spreading it out. So the first group we approached were the Baoyanese community. Because the nature of the Baoyanese community in Singapore is that they're very organized. They have a community organization. They do things annually. So we thought, okay, because they have this mechanism in place, we will work with them first. And then later we work with the Javanese, Minangkabau, Bugis, and finally the Banjaris. This is just the first round, I hope. There are other community groups like the Bataks and so on that we would want to look into. And when we work with the community groups, one of the challenges is to what do you want? What stories do you want to share about your community? Right? What is the essence of your community that we could use in branding, we could use in marketing, that could be the main narrative of the exhibition? So for the Baoyanese community, because when they first came here, they lived in pondos. These are communal housing. So a lot of their content came from that, the history of the pondos and so on and so forth. For the Javanese, it's about inheritance, pusoko. So that became the title of the special exhibition. For the Bugis, it was their spirit. The Bugis, the stereotype of the Bugis is they're very ill-tempered pirates, and so on and so forth, right? But that came from a certain philosophy that the Bugis people hold, Silina Pese. So if you were to hurt me, I will have to retaliate. So that kind of, very almost Viking-like sometimes. Sarafian would say, oh, we're the Viking of the East. Very romanticized, but I would take some caution in that. So that's how we engage them, and that's how we share those narratives, and how we broaden the definition of what it means to be Malay in Singapore. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Was there another question? Oh, yeah.
Banja.
Hi Jamal, nice to see you again.
Hello.
And hi everyone, my name is Shafiq. I mean, just a little history. Jamal and I actually worked for the Orang Banja exhibition actually. So that's why when I came here, I was just like, hey, Jamal, nice to see you again. And I think my question actually is, I would say it's a little bit of one leads into the other. So I'll just ask my first question first. That is directed to Ms. Loh, right, about super diversity, right? In your reading of the theory of super diversity, right? How does oppression, because if you were to read the works of Ngui Wationgo, if you were to read the works of, say, what's the other guy's name? That psychologist who wrote about colonialism. What's African colonialism? Sorry? Frantz Fanon, yes. Yes. Okay. Yeah. So how do they deal with the emotions of oppression with, or rather, does it really address the emotions of oppression in super diversity so that it can then be a story that's told in maybe perhaps in museums, in any other exhibitions that that occurs from here on?
Super diversity is I think it's a super cool, open, like a blank canvas concept that allows all these discussions to take place. Another thing that I didn't talk about was about illegal migrants. So it's about identities, and because it first started for migratory studies, it's really a concept to reflect current ideologies and current trends. And for sensitive issues like oppression, it can be also included in this, consider it a canvas for you to discuss and to see how oppression is being displayed and activated or inform a person's identity and informing a person's sense of belonging, of what and how, where he is in the world. So it is really a canvas to talk about different identities and different happenings to an individual and how these complexities in each individual make up a society. So I hope that answers your question. I'm still in the midst of my research. I hope that I have a space to talk about how super diversity can be applied and how it should be applied in a society like Singapore.
Yeah, actually, in fact, it actually leads into very nicely to the next question that I would like to open up to everyone, actually. Actually, including to Mishaza, if you'd like to answer as well. That canvas thing, right? The ideal is that it's a blank canvas and it's unlimited. But as we all know, and it's not just limited to Singapore, but perhaps anywhere in the world, right? The ideal is a blank canvas, but then unfortunately there will always be a scissors that will cut it out. There will always be things that will basically draw out the boundaries, the OB markers and all that. How then do you negotiate? And it will bring me back to the idea of oppression because, colonial oppression, all that kind of thing, right? And also that historical oppression forcing people to want to tell their stories even more, because they are so emotionally driven about it. How do you manage that as we come up with stories that needs to be told or there's going to be told in these exhibitions? Anyone can start off from that.
I'll try. I think one of the first challenges we face in creating content for the center, I think this might be true for what Shaza does in theatre as well, are myths about us that persist. And a lot of the myths that persist about the Malay community has their roots in the colonial period, right? And because of our lack of support of colonial industry or insolent nature of the Malays, So we get labeled as lazy, we get labeled as pirates, we get labeled as kurang ajar and all that. And today, hundreds of years after that, some of these things are still there, right? If you take a taxi to NUS, you go to NUS, right? Sometimes they would ask you whether you work in the canteen, right? If Alfan Saad was here, he would say the same thing. When he took a taxi to NUS, he was like, oh, you work there, is it? He said, oh, no, I'm a student. He said, oh, Malay University. So some of these things still exist. In the army still, I've experienced this before, even though I'm a senior officer now. If I don't wear my rank, I wear just vest slack, and I'm hanging out at near a smoking point or Land Rover, someone would assume I'm a driver, and whether that Land Rover is mine, right? So no one would think that I'm a person of rank, that I'm intelligent and stuff like that. So when it comes to things like identity, culture, you're talking about oppression, it doesn't necessarily have to be something deliberate. Sometimes it's cultural blind spots. Right? When Michelle was sharing about the Renaissance City Plan, ACSR reports about how it doesn't paint colors on races, I want to problematize that. Are we uniform in terms of our concerns? Does our community give the same way? Right? Do we have similar consumption habits? We don't. Right? So if we're going to pump the same amount of money for each community, right? 75% of us are Chinese. A smaller percentage of that, 10% are Malay, a smaller percentage, 3% Indian, right? Do we get an even piece of the pie? And if we do, is that enough for our community, right? The Chinese community would have a stronger culture of patronship compared to the Malay community. I think the Indian community has a stronger culture of patronship than the Malay community. So if we get the same funding as the other communities and we don't have patrons, how do we square that circle? Right? So I think while we want to exist in a world that is post-race, post-ethnicity, I think our baggage are still quite held back in the colonial period. So that's one of the areas that I think we need to pay attention to. And I think even if we use terms like super diversity, we still need to interrogate our history and our baggage in terms of how do we apply it accordingly. Yeah.
Yes, I can add on. While we were discussing before the talk, policies may suggest certain recommendations, but when it comes to actual implementations and actualizing these suggestions, it's not necessarily fully reflective of what policies say. And in terms of oppression, yes, I can give you an example about this research project that I did for traditional Chinese music. So we tried to document creative developments of traditional Chinese music in Singapore. And because of how traditional arts are, and in the Chinese there are different factions of traditional, even though we are all Chinese music, right? But even so, within us, we have different factions. So in order to bring different factions together to agree that we have creative developments, we are oppressing ourselves. We kind of stop ourselves. Hey, this is not Chinese music. You shouldn't put it in. You are adding electronics. This is not traditional anymore. So we put in the oppression ourselves as self-censorship automatically. And just bring people together was already a first step. So I think there are different degrees of oppression, of how each art form and each race, we kind of reflect different degrees of oppression, different degrees of self-censorship. And I think as we are a super tiny nation, right? We are small, and I think there is no need to create competitions amongst ourselves, and we should really be united, especially to recognize our own achievements as a race, as an art form, whatever. We should really come together and recognize it and to push forward together. But thanks for that question. Yeah.
I think you asked a question about how to manage stories of oppression, right? I think it starts with education, right? To educate oneself and to educate others. I think that's a responsibility that museums, educational facilities, arts organizations, arts practitioners, everybody's responsible in that education. And if you are representing a minority group, then obviously the story of oppression is almost akin to any experience that you might have, right, in society. Okay, so one thing that I want to share is that, being in the Singapore Indian Fine Arts Society, there is a certain sort of representation of traditional arts being very pure, very chaste, very sort of elevated, atas as you want to call it, only a certain group of people can actually be a part of it or learn it. There are all these sort of misconceptions along the way, right? And what a lot of people don't know is the history or the origins of how the traditional arts even started. Okay, and if you were to look at Bharatanatyam, for example, it was actually originated by a group of Devadasis who were actually outcasts of society. They were extremely oppressed. They only performed in the temples. And it started off that way, and along the way, somehow or other, it became a Brahminical practice. And suddenly the Devadasis were seen as bad. They were seen as prostitutes. They were seen as outcasts. They were seen as inferior when they were the originators to begin with, right? From this Brahminical sort of taking over, everything about the art form became censored. They got rid of all of the things that might be controversial because they felt like they had to portray themselves as higher beings, as higher performers of this particular form. So, in fact, the Bharatanatyam that we practice today, the classical art forms that we practice today, is, a lot of times, a lot of people can say it's a bastardized version of the origin, right? But a lot of people don't know that. It's a very controversial topic. It's also something that I'm looking into because I just came across it about 2 or 3 years ago. I didn't know this, It's only by looking into what research scholars are doing out there to really understand how this particular art form even evolved and how it's being practiced today. So it's a difficult thing to contend with, for sure, this idea of oppression and how do you manage it. But to me, it begins with learning. It begins with educating yourself.
Thank you so much, everybody, for the questions. There are a few questions that we were not able to answer, and I would encourage asking them later on. And I also wanted to thank all of you. I am smarter now than 2 hours ago, so thank you so much. And I feel like that's how you. I hope that's how you all feel as well. So yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Ms. Shaza, and of course to our 3 speakers for that robust discussion. So ladies and gentlemen, you have any burning question, please submit it through slido.com at 409652. All right, and now to present a token of appreciation to the speakers, we would like to invite our MHF General Manager, Madam Julina, up front. Please, a round of applause for Madam Julina. Okay, first up, may I invite our first speaker for today, Mr. Jamal. A round of applause, please, ladies and gentlemen. Up next, let's hear it for Miss Meneka. And also Miss Michelle. How about I invite everyone here to take a group photo together with Madam Julina, please? Yeah, including Miss Shaza. Yes. If you're watching us through our social media platform, don't forget to follow us, okay, on Facebook, subscribe us on our YouTube channel, okay? And if you're snapping any photos of today, please insert our special hashtag MHF, okay, hashtag Malay Heritage Foundation. Thank you very much, Madam Julina. Okay, as mentioned earlier, okay, we actually have a special project showcase I would like to share with everyone here. But first, may I invite our friends from ITE College Central and also from Raffles Institution up front, please. Come on, a round of applause for them. Yes. Okay. Come on up. Don't be shy. Okay, maybe you would like to stand somewhere. Okay, hold on. Our friends actually has prepared special videos, in fact a presentation that was done last year based on a special project. Yes. Okay, okay, now I'd like to hand over the microphone to Madam Julina first.
I know we are a little bit overrunning, but I hope you can just stay for a while more to give some space to our young presenters here. Basically, when we started this series of Sembang Ilmu, we invited our youth to come up with a project, you know, to kind of express what it means to be beyond CIMO. This was their first project. Yeah? So we selected. We had a few engagement and we selected 2 projects, one from Raffles Institution, right, and another from ITE. So we invited them to at least share what they have achieved so far. Is it completed yet? Not yet, right? Still in the process. But I think what is important is we want to hear from the youth themselves, how do they view some of these things, you know? So and then we leave it to them in terms of how they want to present it. So we just want to take about 5 minutes for each groups, and then after that we can go makan. Okay? So I hope you all indulge us a little bit, give them a bit of airtime so that to encourage them. Yeah. So Gareth and team, who's presenting?
All right. Let's
IT first. Sorry, Rian.
From IT College Central. Okay. IT College East.
You.
My bad, my apologies. Okay, maybe we'd like to have the microphone over there.
Use the microphone?
Yes, and feel free to present it, okay? Once again, our friends from IT College East.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. So we are from ITE College East. So yeah, we will be presenting our presentation now.
Today we'll be talking about several iconic locations in Singapore and how these landmarks helped our nation change through time. So we will be sharing about how our idea can spread knowledge about Singapore multiculturalism and promote it through art.
Okay, so first up we have Haji Lane. Haji Lane named after the word Hajj. So Hajj is a pilgrimage undertaken by Muslims to Mecca and Medina. And Haji Lane is also known to be one of the many popular tourist attraction sites, consisting of wall arts which also attract youngsters. Other than that, as we can see here, this is the Sultan Mosque. Although Sultan Mosque is one of the focal points for Singapore's Muslim community, the mosque provides guided tours for the non-Muslims to learn about the architecture of the mosque and also about the Islamic faith.
Little India offers a lot of cuisines from South and North India are included, butter chicken, biryani, and etc. Additionally, they offer a wide range of goods to purchase, including electronics, groceries, jewelry shops, and sari stores, and a lively site worth experiencing during festive seasons.
Next is Chinatown. So Chinatown is actually a very beautiful district, and it is one of the Chinatown also boasts a Buddhist temple, mosque, and Hindu temple along like a single street. So around this area, you will find like many hidden gems, like a rooftop garden with a beautiful pagoda and food court selling vegetarian cuisines.
So we thought of all these locations just mentioned and putting all these locations within the circle through a piece of art, spreading awareness and promoting to viewers that Singapore is a multicultural society which provide a conducive environment for both Singaporeans and tourists of different ethnicities and cultures to be able to welcome each other freely into their beliefs and lifestyles.
In conclusion, despite Singapore having multiple locations representing iconic cultures and beliefs, all of these locations manage to come together to form a multiracial and inclusive society. And it also definitely allows us to have a deeper understanding and knowledge about the different practices from various religions and cultures that surround us in Singapore.
So with that being said, this is the end. So thank you, everyone.
Next group, do you want to present first? Okay, so I think at the end, what we hope to see is some kind of a map, right, that is going to be presented. So there's still work in progress, so the final thing will probably be a map that showcases some of these iconic buildings that represents the heritage and the ethnicities in Singapore. So for, this is a project from Raffles Institution.
Test 1, 2, 3. All right, yeah, thank you very much for the beautiful introduction. Yeah, appreciate it. So yeah, I'm Sam. I'm from Raffles Institution, and I have my homies Gareth and Aiman. So yeah, we're going to be presenting a podcast called Kita Bahasa. It's actually made up of 3 words. Kita, which is us, Bahasa is language. And if you see the kitab, right, kitab actually means book. So yes, it's like an open book. You're going to be learning everything and anything there is to be learning about languages in this podcast. And as you can see the logo, right, my friend Gareth will be explaining how he created this logo. Yeah.
Okay, so I think I based the logo mostly off of the logo of the Malay Heritage Foundation, which is, I think it used a Kufic style Arabic calligraphy, right? So I actually tried to emulate that in the design of the logo for the podcast. So I think I'll explain the tree. It looks like a kind of like a maze, but I guess I'll show you. In the middle, right, like this part here, right, is the kitab and bahasa, but it's like kitab is here and then bahasa is here, but it's upside down. Then actually we have like the main theme of our whole like podcast is actually kepentingan dan keindahan bahasa ibunda di Singapura. So right, we have bahasa ibunda here, and then kepentingan and keindahan here, but it's all like reverse lah, to try to make it fit because there's like a certain style to it, I guess. So this is the concept behind the logo lah. Okay, next slide.
All right, so we're going to be talking about what this podcast is mainly about. It's a very refreshing podcast, as Gareth said, about kepentingan dan keindahan bahasa ibunda di Singapura. Because right, in Singapore, Singapore thrives on bilingualism. Everyone's being taught both English and their mother tongue, be it Tamil, Malay, Chinese, or NTIL, non-Tamil Indian languages. But the thing is, right, what is actually done for you to realize your warisan dan budaya? What is done to realize your culture? Like, okay, you're learning Tamil, that's great, but does the school actually teach you more about your culture and how you guys came about your roots? Same for Malay, because Malay, right, I kind of feel like it's a colonial construct, the word Malay. Because a lot of people in Singapore, they identify as Malay, but if you delve in deeper, you can find out that they have ancestors from Java, the Straits of Sunda, then what else? But Bugis, Banjaris, and so on. And these students, they have to realize where they actually came from so that they can understand themselves much better and the community as well. Yep, next slide, please. All right, so the primary goal of this podcast is to explore the multitude of languages that were or are being spoken by the Malay community and to encourage the Malay community in general to keep in touch with all these languages. Yep. Next slide.
Okay, so our podcast, there's a couple of things that we plan to cover. Mainly is about discussing like the different languages, not really languages, but like the variations from Java, from
Basically, we're just going to talk about, I think because we know of all these languages, sometimes we think of them as dialects, right, of Malay, but actually they're not. They're related, but separate languages. So I think the podcast actually aims to have generally discuss about these languages, why are they maybe important, why should we care about them, and also maybe that the relation these languages have with the Malay that is taught in school, which Bahasa Baku, which may not be actually the most natural way that Malay people speak in Singapore. Next slide, please. Yeah, so basically, so I guess just now we mentioned there are actually many Malay languages that are spoken in Singapore, which are like these. We got Javanese, Bugis, Sundanese, Banjaris, and more, a lot more. And I think that actually these languages are a lot more representative of the Malay community in Singapore, besides the Bahasa Baku, the Malay that's being taught in school. So yeah.
Next slide, please. Thanks.
Yeah. So it's basically that. And also in Singapore, if you think about it, right, obviously we don't have all these languages being taught in school, right? Only one standard form of the language is being taught in school. So I think that this is something that really appeals to students, as we're all in school, right? And we have to learn the mother tongue. Do we really know what mother tongue is? Or do we know what is relationship is with our so-called true mother tongue? Or is Malay our true mother tongue? In that sense, we can ask we try to pose this challenge to the viewers of the podcast, and we want them to ask themselves so because they lack this institutional recognition, right, we try to provide a platform for the languages to present themselves. Maybe we can get representative of the language to come and join our podcast every now and then, and this is what we try to achieve.
Can I add on? Okay, so it is also about raising awareness about these different variations, especially in the Malay languages. So for me personally, my mom's family originates from Java, but I don't understand the Malay form of the Malay Java. I can't really understand it. So I want to learn and I want to understand to be able to connect with my family and my relatives overseas. And so I believe the Malay word is to melestarikan, is to continue and to bring it back, to revive it again. So yeah, that's one of the aims of our podcast as well.
Okay, so then besides this, I think I mentioned earlier that we don't we obviously not taught these languages in school, right? And also, even if we're not taught that these languages in school, they are also not passed down by the parents or grandparents. So after like a certain generation, like I mean, even within 1 or 2 generations, right, the language just completely disappears from like the speaker. So like, it is very difficult for the speaker to actually want to learn the language, even outside of the family. There are no resources. Like honestly, how are we going to be able to come across let's just say a Javanese textbook or a Bugis textbook if you want to learn language by yourself without the parents, right? So the podcast also try to help you in a sense to learn, like maybe, or introduce you to the basics of the language. Maybe in 1 or 2 episodes, we'll give you some words and phrases to learn. Then maybe from there, it's easier for you to build up your knowledge of the language and you listen to your parents or stuff like that. Because there are no resources out there for these languages, especially in the Singaporean context. Because maybe you think about it, maybe Bugis or maybe Javanese spoken in Singapore is different from the Javanese that is spoken in Java or in Bugis or elsewhere. So this is also one of the things. Next slide, please. So yeah, Yon? Okay, so basically we use the podcast, right, as a way, because we find the podcast it kind of encompasses the Sembang aspect, right? Because we're all like kind of, it's chill, and we get to talk about these issues in the most lighthearted way possible. I think it's the best, most sincere way of garnering attention and helping us learn more about the languages. And also at the same time, it gives a platform for people who are interested, enthusiasts, right, and the representatives of the language to express themselves and express their culture to a wider audience, which is maybe more like young people. Because I find, young people are the people who are supposed to continue this language in the future. If it dies amongst our generation, it dies forever in Singapore, essentially. So we better quickly use a platform to start it up again. If not, because after that, it will really just go away.
All right, so I'd like to add on to what Gareth said. So pretty much, right, this podcast, we are like a treasure trove of sorts because we're like the middlemen. Like most of the people who know their roots, they do not have the appropriate resources to learn more about it. You know what? We'll help you guys out. We'll be the guys that suggest to you where you can go and learn all these cool things, and we'll also bring in experts into our podcast, and they'll be sharing their ideas with you guys, and you guys can be enlightened at the end of the day. So yes, please, we will be updating you on when our podcast is going to release. Just if you're free, just tune in like in your car or something. Yeah. Then you can listen to our great voices as we speak. Yes, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Gareth, Sam, and all that. So, okay, let me just explain this quickly before I hand over back to Shari. Yes. Sembang Ilmu Plus is conceptualized differently because we added a project element, because we want to invite our participants to actually submit project ideas that they can then execute, and they'll be given seed funding for it, right? Yeah. So, so for them, they will be producing a series of podcasts covering the different languages, and well, hopefully they might even expand to other ethnic languages as well. So we, the foundation actually kind of mentors them in a way to help them in the process, but the project ideas, content is everything done by them themselves. So similarly for this second session, under the topic of recreation of heritage, we are also inviting you guys, if you have proposals, submit your proposal. There is a website, you can go to our website and download the forms and submit it, and then we will review it, and we will feel that is interesting enough to add on, we will actually give you the seed funding for it. Yeah, so just look out to our Facebook page, Facebook for the announcements and details. Do encourage your friends to take part, because we want to see something that you actually produce, and we'll help you curate some of it, but most of the time we actually leave you to actually produce the content, because this is coming from you. How you guys see the issue and all that. Yeah. So with that, I hand it over back to Shari.
Okay, thank you very much, friends from Raffles Institutions. But before that, we have a special video prepared by them. Let's sit back, relax, and enjoy.
I hope all of you are having a great day. We are proud to announce the release of our new podcast, Kita Bahasa. Yeah, my name is Sam, and I'm going to be taking you through the details of this wonderful production. The theme of today's podcast
is keindahan dan kepentingan bahasa ibunda. And through this, we wish to share more about the languages being spoken by the Malay community in Singapore. Let's go.
Modern day Singapore thrives on bilingualism, with most children being taught both English and their mother tongue in schools. However, do you think that students really know the significance behind their true mother tongues? Do you think they are truly interested in learning about the beauty and importance of speaking their mother tongue? And if you don't, you've come to the right place. My name is Aiman, and this podcast is for you.
Hi everyone, I'm Gareth. Do you know that Bugis, Banjarese and Javanese are actually not mere dialects and are a bunch of separate but distinct languages? I believe these languages emblematically reflect on the culture and history of the Malay community in Singapore. However, these languages are not passed down enough and receive little to no institutional support. Furthermore, resources are few and far between, making learning very difficult for anybody who's interested.
If you are interested about the history and culture of the Malay languages in Singapore, do tune in to our podcast. I'm Toby, and here are the other members in our podcast. Jangan lupa, the name of our podcast is Kita Bahasa, a Sembang Ilmu Plus project. See you in the first episode.
Well done. Okay, don't forget, ladies and gentlemen, to follow their podcast, Kita Bahasa. Okay, so most of you are wondering, how can I be part of this special project? As mentioned by Madam Julina just now, we actually call for proposal. We have all the information that you need here. So I'm going to just skip through because it's already been explained by Madam Julina just now. All you have to do is to scan the QR code. Okay? And then I'm seeing some excitement already. Okay, probably a new podcast coming up soon. And then form a group between 5 to 10 members. And please visit or log into the website. This website is actually very hard for me to pronounce. And then follow us on our social media platform, Facebook, YouTube, and LinkedIn. Okay? Subscribe, okay? And subscribe to our newsletter too. Nice. Okay, wonderful. All right, with that, we have come to the end of today's session. I would like to say a big thank you to everyone here for spending your time with us. A round of applause for all of us, please. Okay, so stay tuned and follow our social medias for update. We are now on Facebook, YouTube, LinkedIn, and subscribe to every single thing that you see just now. And once again, thank you very much. Let me end off today with pantun. Yes, because we are talking about integrations and all that. So this pantun has something to do with today's topic. Putera pemalu gembira hati, kerana dara membalas senyuman. Bangsa bersatu, teguhnya berdiri, seluruh dunia jadi sebutan. Mulanya asmara tetap bersopan, bagaikan bunga mekar sekuntum. Terus bersama maju ke hadapan tanpa mengira apapun kaum. With that, my name is Syaril Samri. Till next time, goodbye.